Hello everyone, and thank you very much, despite not being there, to give me the chance to introduce you to philosophy in Oriental martial arts and its practical relevance for fight application. It sounds like a huge gap between philosophy on the one side and fight application on the other side. And yes, indeed, I am talking about real fight performance, for instance in the streets. There are obvious influences like physical skills such as power, endurance, strength, or technique, and also other one well-known psychology, for example, mental toughness. And these and many more determine the outcome of a real fight. I would claim that also philosophy can be one determining factor of the outcome of a real fight scenario. So does this mean we just need to read to become Superman? No, not really, but it depends on how we see reading. Musashi said the following. Miyamoto Musashi was a very famous Japanese swordsman. He said, "Do not just read, memorize or imitate, but so that you realize the principle from within your own heart." So the point is that reading doesn't mean that we understand something completely in a way to be capable to apply something. And knowledge is not the same as belief. But we can imagine that our most honest and deepest beliefs and views and the values we carry within us, that these factors can influence how we assess situations, that they can influence our mindsets and our behavior and actability. And I want to give a few examples where we can see this. Have a look on the first pictures on the left and right side, the men. In comparable situations with different facial expressions and body language, probably having a different mindset and maybe also different behavior in the situation and a different likelihood of coping. So imagine on the one side the perception of pain as something exclusively negative, something that scares us, something we need to avoid. And on the other side, the perception of pain as something which is negatively, of course, but something that comes and goes, something that we cannot avoid. And if it comes, we need to overcome it. Probably you can imagine that these differences in view, in perception, will affect our mindset. If we land in the situation, and already before, it will probably change our behavior when we approach a potential painful situation. The same goes for perception of life in society. If we made good experiences with other people, supportive people, helpful people, we may also become more trustful and interacting more easily with people. On the other side, if we made bad experiences, we may view other people rather as competitors or even as a threat. And we may, regarding our behavior, we may tend to rely more on ourselves or in extreme cases even to isolate ourselves in order to protect. So in the Western world, we know quite well that the mind does affect the body, and the Oriental approach is that philosophy, even prior, affects the mind, which then affects the body. We see Taoistic and Zen Buddhistic aspects in daily martial arts practice, in Asia as well as here. And we see the same aspects and even many, many more in historic literature coming from Asia. So people back then who have been in scenarios to the death, they considered these philosophical aspects to be crucially affecting the outcome of a fight, and hence they should be trained and considered in martial arts practice. So if such people, being in the serious situations, considered them so crucial, then it's worth to ask what have been the key ideas they considered to be so essential. Therefore, I took 3 representative books, one from Miyamoto Musashi, a Japanese swordsman, Another one from Takuan Zoho, who was a Zen Buddhist, and the third one from Chozanji, who was a samurai from a more peaceful area compared to Musashi, and he was known as an intellectual. So he's kind of a mix of the pure swordsman and the pure monk. What I did with the 3 books was, after reading them, following the principles of qualitative content analysis. And this qualitative content analysis works in the following way, that each paragraph, throughout all 3 books, each paragraph is paraphrased. It gets kind of a title representing the topic, the content of this paragraph. From all these titles representing content, we can derive different categories. And the number of mentions, how often a particular topic was mentioned in a paragraph, this number of mentions defines the key ideas, because the more often something was addressed, the more important it seems. The results and the structure of the results you can see here. I will describe a little bit later what these categories mean, but I show them you now and explain how they are related to each other. We have 3 different levels. On the first level, the most important one, is the category non-attachment of the mind. And Takuan called it immovable wisdom. This is the core of all the other categories, and all other categories will result from non-attachment of the mind. On the second level, there's formlessness in body and mind. And this formlessness leads to being unpredictable, adaptable, spontaneous, and developing a sense for beneficial actions, which can be seen on the third level. Some of these mentions relating to unpredictability, adaptability, spontaneity, and sense for beneficial actions are partially related directly to non-attachment of the mind, and some were derived from formlessness. But there is one other category on the third level which comes only from non-attachment of the mind. There is no connection to formlessness, and this is ethical obstacles. For example, the problem to do harm to another person. So let's start with the most important, non-attachment and immovable wisdom. Non-attachment and impermanence of basically everything are very crucial things in the Buddhist Noble Eightfold Path. And the connection between these two is simple. If you are aware of impermanence, you will less likely attach to something. For example, if you get a cup as a gift, in the moment when you get this gift, if you are aware of the impermanence of the cup, and you knew, let's assume you knew the future, that this cup will fall down 5 seconds later and will break. Probably you will not attach to it in the moment of receiving it in an emotional way as much as if you were not aware of this impermanence. If I show you this picture and ask you what you see, probably most of you, at least in the first moment, will answer, you see a red leaf. And this is a good example for attachment. Takuan uses it to describe what attachment and non-attachment means. Standing in front of a tree and spotting a red leaf, if your mind attaches to the one single red leaf, you will not see all the others. So the problem is, seeing the red leaf is normal and unavoidable because it's the most extraordinary thing in the picture. But after the realization, there is no further reason to stick to it, to have your focus only on this red leaf and missing everything that goes around. And this is a problem, seemingly, in martial arts. Chozanji has a very challenging request, not even to attach to self-interest. All self-interest discarded, nothing can throw you off balance, and you will move with no hesitation and no restraint. So only if you lose all that attachment, you will become immovable, meaning nothing can throw you off balance. And this affects your acting, and your actability and your actions, showed by then you move with no hesitation and no restraint. Non-attachment affects reactions, but also actions. Imagine you would not attach to experiences and expectations which are built on experiences. Every magician uses this for his tricks to abuse our thinking in patterns, to abuse our expectations in order to distract us from what is really going on. The same way is how tricks in sports work, and obviously feint attacks in martial arts. About actions, imagine not to attach to movement patterns. If you don't follow particular patterns, particular sequences, that makes you formlessness. You do not follow a particular form. But formlessness is a very abstract term, so I need to explain it a little bit more. And when talking about formlessness and showing you a picture of water, probably many of you will think of one guy with one quote. It's Bruce Lee saying, "Empty your mind, be formless, shapeless, like water." Now you put water into a cup, it becomes the cup. You put water into a bottle, it becomes the bottle. You put it into a teapot, it becomes the teapot. Now water can flow or it can crash. Be water, my friend. So Bruce Lee talks about visual and physical adaptations, a physical kind of formlessness. But the thing is that formlessness goes also for functionality. And this is very important. So let's try to get rid of any attempt to imitate something, to reproduce something that is learned, or to represent something like a style. Do not attach to ideas how fights look like or how concepts have to work. Attachment to styles like judo, karate, fighting styles, and also not to tools or specific solutions. Because this way you will create a pool of solutions, and when being in a situation, you will try to select from this limited pool the most appropriate solution. And since situations are so diverse in fighting, it is very likely that you will not find the completely appropriate solution. And even if so, all this selection is processing. This takes time and it hinders immediate actions. So instead of all this attachment, let's be only aware on the situation itself, and very important, on our own position, our own attitude towards it. Then we can sense simply what is required to do. And by not choosing from a pool, but doing what is required, we will achieve formlessness in body and mind. This formlessness has some consequences which are quite beneficial. The authors say we will become unpredictable, adaptable, spontaneous, and appropriate in actions. Musashi says you should not have a favorite weapon. To become overfamiliar with one weapon is as much a fault as not knowing it sufficiently well. Obviously, if you have a favorite weapon, you will most likely tend to use it preferably, even if the situation is not the most appropriate for it. And this tendency to use your favorite makes you predictable. Chozanji says, as one relies on what the mind creates, immediate actions will not be possible anymore. Our mind creates thoughts all the time, and if we rely on these constructions, processing again is going on, and it takes time. No immediate actions, no spontaneous actions. It does not come instinctively then. When in a fight to the death, one wants to employ all one's weapons to the utmost. Musashi was well known to be a person who uses everything with full commitment, no hesitation, and using everything possible to gain advantage. It is important to me to highlight what formlessness means or what it does not mean. Formlessness does not mean to have no technique, or that technique can be implemented in a poor way or floppy way. Because without technique, also a strong mind cannot put its functionality into proper effect. So you cannot just throw a certain punch however you want. There are certain goals why you do a movement, and there are certain biomechanical optimizations how to do it. You should train this, you should optimize it. But formlessness goes on a greater scale in terms of pattern. You should not stick to pattern, sequences, and so on. In this regard, you should become formlessness. Flexible and not choosing from a particular pool of solutions. The last category addresses ethics. Musashi speaks about the non-ethical, stereotypically spoken, non-ethical bad guy who has no moral standards, when saying he values humans lower than insects and does so without effort. He is not restricted by anything. He does not freeze, does not wait, does not retreat. He has no doubts, cannot be moved, and faces an opponent without a single thought. Furthermore, he goes further and says that in terms of mindset, the non-ethical bad guy is even superior over the common martial artist who has trained for years or decades. And isn't that sad? But in the same time, it shows us how much this issue of ethics was considered to be crucial. About the ethics, there are three major sub-issues, we could say. The first one is the personal judgment of what is wrong and right. And this is, as I said, very personal. It's not objective at all. And the other one has a different judgment. So we need to be aware, if we are not willing to do what we personally consider to be wrong, we allow the other one to do exactly the same, or even worse, to maybe innocent ones. The second one is responsibility. Typically, the ethical person has a problem with feeling responsible for the bad things, the bad outcomes of a fight. So we hesitate because we feel responsible if we punch someone and the nose is bleeding or the face is deformed, whatsoever. But we can change this view. As long as were centered in ourselves, we did not provoke, we did nothing to contribute to this escalation. But the other one, the offender, brought this situation to us with all its aggression and violence. The other one is responsible for this situation to develop and to escalate. So we can also accept that the other one should take responsibility for the outcome of the fight. We just do what is required. And then the third one is the hesitation to take lead. And it is very crucial to take lead without hesitation in order to get control over the fight. And this is essential to be successful. Taking the lead is easier if we do not feel responsible for the outcomes, and not feeling so responsible and guilty for the bad things is easier if we do not stuck so much to our judgment of good and right. Giving you an example from Takuan, because he expressed this judgment by the request to become like a mirror. Setting up his whole mind like a mirror, the man who employs the martial arts will have no intention of discriminating right from wrong. If our mind becomes a mirror, we shall completely neutrally reflect without judgment. The other one escalated the situation, the other one brings the violence to us, and we just reflect by doing what is necessary, by doing what we were basically asked by the other to do. Musashi says if he, the opponent, has fallen into evasive or retreating attitudes, we must crush him straight away, with no concern for his presence. It is essential to crush him all at once. So Musashi is the best example for a person valuing a lot, no hesitation, full commitment, taking lead, and using everything to gain advantage over your opponent, without mercy, without hesitation. I want to conclude this and wrap up the presentation by focusing on only one aspect of possible attachments, the attachment to fighting styles. There are so many fighting styles, and instead of attaching to these, we should become an unattached fighter, not an attached judoka, boxer, whatsoever. But then I thought, no, even this is too much attachment. It is the attachment to fighting. My co-author, during one of our conversations, said these few but powerful words: he fights, I don't. And what he meant was not that he stands there and is getting punched without defending himself. He means this mirror thing, to be centered within ourselves and not approaching or entering a situation with the intention of fighting. The other one brings the fight, but I don't. I just accept what he brings to me, I reflect it, and I do what is required to do. So instead, how about becoming our immovable selves? And this goes across life situations. Only if we are fully aware of our personal views and attitudes in all different situations, only then this allows us to act spontaneously, in line with our attitudes and instinctively. And if the situation is more extreme, it allows us to act accordingly, appropriately. So thank you very much again for your attention, for listening to this tape. And I'm really sorry that I couldn't be there. I would have loved to see some of the faces I have seen 4 years ago when I participated last time on this conference. Thank you very much. And I would be glad to maybe receive 1 or 2 mails, questions, interests. Yeah. Thank you very much.